I'm Peasy. I'm the guy who makes these videos. And for this video, I wanted to ask 3 teachers at different points in their career the same 10 questions and see how they responded. So before I screw up this video by messing up my lines, let's go meet these teachers. Please state your name for the record.
My name's Corey Winter.
Ryan Michael Conway.
David Sperino.
What was it like growing up?
I grew up in a small town, Holly, New York, probably about 50 minutes to an hour away from here. Very similar to York in the sense that not too many kids in my graduating class. I think I graduated with about 80 kids or so not too many more than you have here. Rural area, farm area, not a city or anything like that, just a small town. Yeah.
Well, I grew up in a small town, not all that different from this. Part of my life I lived in the village of Attica, part of it I lived in the country, so pretty much half and half really, until I turned 18 and graduated and went to college. But I have 2 parents who are still married and still together and still obviously alive. Hey, Alyssa. And 2 younger sisters. So that was kind of, I don't know, the basics of it. My mother was an English teacher, which I guess sort of paved the way for me to do similar things. And my father was a prison guard when I was young, and he climbed the ladder to ultimately being the superintendent of Attica Correctional Facility. So pretty big job that he had, and of course that shapes your upbringing. So
Okay.
yeah.
What it was like growing up was I hung around with all the friends in my neighborhood, and we were outside all morning, all afternoon, all evening, even after it got dark. We used to play hide and seek. We had no cell phones, we had TV, but we spent a lot of time playing baseball, football, basketball, whatever the sport was in season. That's what we played, and we hung around together, and if there wasn't anything to do, then we stayed outside and we made up our own games.
What was your first friend group like?
My first friend group, it kind of varied growing up when I was really little in elementary school. It was just whoever was in my class, really easygoing, made good amount of friends. Then up into middle school, high school, started making more friends with the people that I was involved with sports with or any other extracurricular, like chorus or band. Just whoever I was really around.
My first friend group was probably determined, like very first, before even kindergarten started, was determined by where I went to daycare. So they were 2 kids, 2 guys now, obviously, but our parents were teachers. That's one thing we shared in common. And so that was really, I think, my first friend group. And then, of course, mostly boys who liked sports, and parents were prison guards and were active in our community, like youth sports coaches and things like that. So, yeah, I'd say that's kind of how I would summarize them.
Okay.
My first friend group, we all grew up in the same neighborhood within 2 or 3 streets, and most of the kids were from Italian families, so most of my friends were Italian. We lived on the north side of Fairport, and we just hung around. We knew these guys from the time before I went to school until the time I graduated.
What teacher growing up had a big impact on you?
If I had to say one teacher that had the biggest impact on me growing up, I would probably say my PE teacher and coach, John Grillo. A real good guy, really kind of instilled my work ethic that I've had to this day. Just a great role model, really great with the kids, so great guy.
I think the one that always comes to mind when I think of that question is a teacher named Miss Smith, who sort of ironically taught 11th grade English at the time. It's funny, like I don't remember specifically much of what we did in that class, like content-wise, because that sort of thing like fades over time. But there's sort of an old saying in teaching is like they'll never remember what you taught them, they'll remember how you made them feel. And one of Miss Smith's defining traits was that she was demanding. She was also funny, but she wasn't by any means like relaxed. Like it was serious, but she loved what she did, and she held her students to a high standard and held students accountable for their work. And so it was one of those kind of eye-opening moments where I learned that people, when they look back on their teachers, they don't really think back fondly on the ones who took it easy on them. They look back on the ones who were critical of them and who valued what they did, but also like pushed them, and so I've tried to be that kind of teacher.
You've been doing a great job.
Thank you, Alyssa.
You're so welcome.
But I'm always sort of thinking, am I sort of fulfilling that, and I guess that's the bar that I'm always shooting for.
Okay.
My 10th and 12th grade English teacher, Mr. Vincent Coppola, he's one of the reasons I became a teacher and an English teacher, and he had a big influence on me. He was very, very good teacher. He brought a lot of excitement to the classroom, he had a good sense of humor, and he went on to become a priest because I went to McQuaid.
What was it like leaving your high school?
It was bittersweet, I'd say. Because I had a ton of great memories, made a ton of great friends, and it was a little surreal when it was, graduation came and gone. I was ready to move on, but I was ready at that point. I was ready to kind of branch out and kind of see what life was like outside of a small town in Holly. So I went to school I went to college at Brockport. Had a great time there. So it was bittersweet.
I really enjoyed high school, and I went to college with one of my friends from high school. And I had this vision that like my, popularity, I suppose, was somehow going to magically transfer to college. And it doesn't. Like it just doesn't work that way. You're not in the same peer group as you have been for the last 13 years of a public school experience. So I don't know why I was foolish enough to think that, but I was. So college is a big adjustment, You find a group that is, your niche. I still loved it. I mean, I had a great time in college, don't get me wrong. But I think there were some misconceptions that had to be kind of knocked down at first. And then once you leave, it's kind of never really the same. It's almost, for the first couple years, it's still your hometown. You're in my experience, I'd live with my parents in the summertime and over winter break and things like that. And, I worked at a local golf course and things like that. So you stay connected with your hometown in those first few years, or at least that was my experience. But now that once I had got my job here and I moved out permanently, you maintain a connection, but it's a much looser one. Like, you don't all of a sudden know every kid that walks down the street, or you hear of you see your classmates on Facebook and it's like, whoa, they've got a senior in high school now, and all that stuff just kind of happens.
Right.
It was a little sad to leave some of the friends I left behind, but the thing about going to the Catholic school at McQuaid was the kids came from all different parts of the city and the suburbs. And so, when I went home at night, I basically hung out with the kids that I grew up with, and occasionally as I got older, my junior and senior year, and I could drive, I would go and see some of the guys I knew at school. But it was a little sad to leave it behind, just like it is in any high school, but not as sad as it was to leave my hometown friends.
Do you think life would have turned out differently if you chose another career path?
I absolutely do. I was honestly thinking about, instead of going to Brockport for physical education, I was thinking about going to University of Buffalo for business. And I would not have met the people I've met throughout school. Probably wouldn't have ended up here and wouldn't be a teacher right now. Would probably be, working in some business as an accountant or something like that. I'm not sure, but would be definitely different.
Without question. How could it not? If I had not chosen to be to enter teaching in my sophomore or junior year of college, I wouldn't have found my way to York, which means I wouldn't have gotten married and I wouldn't have had the children that I have. That decision changes everything. You don't know it at the time and you can't. But no matter what decision you make, it's going to determine the course of your life. No doubt about it.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to become a teacher, but if I hadn't become a teacher, one of the things I thought about becoming was a journalist. And but then I decided not to take that path. And I think if I hadn't become a teacher, I would have become a police officer.
What do you think the most important thing in life should be?
The most important thing in life, I think, is just, your experiences that you have throughout life. Just living life day by day, taking the highs and lows, just going through that. It shouldn't be anything really materialistic. Probably I'd say if I had to pinpoint one thing, just, enjoying time with your family and friends.
Love and family.
Okay.
I think the most important thing in life, because I was brought up this way, is to be good to your family and to have family members around you, because friends come and go, but family is always there. And you might not get along with everybody in your family all the time, but they are your family, they're your blood, and when push comes to shove, they're there for you, and you have to be there for them. So I think that's the most important thing. And it's to try to be happy and to get a good job and work hard for what you get.
How is your life different now than it was back then?
Oh, when I was back in school.
Mhm.
It's a lot different, more independent. I'm not living at home. I'm out in my own place. I'm able to do my own things. I have to be a little bit more accountable for myself. I don't have someone else to pick up, the scrap when I'm not really keeping up with my own life. But, you love it. You learn to love it. There's things that you miss about being younger, like not having to work or anything like that. But, if you love what you do, it's not really working. You find time to do stuff with your friends. You find things that you enjoy. So it's different, but I like it.
Like 20? Wow. Okay, I have a lot more responsibility now. I have kids, and that changes everything. That completely, you go from living life for yourself to living your life for them, essentially. Not to say that I don't still do things for myself. Like I still, I find a lot of, I find my job very rewarding personally. So that's for me. But all decisions sort of run through that perspective of how are we paving the right path for the kids, so, when you're 20, 21, when I first got this job here, I had all kinds of money in my bank account. It was awesome because I didn't have a mortgage. All the utilities were covered, like through my rent to my landlord, So it's like I was just taking up space and just living the dream. And then all of a sudden, when all of those things get put on you and you alone, like it makes you a lot. I guess you're just more responsible. You have no choice but to be.
Got a lot more money than I did back then. I mean, we brought up in a middle-class family. When I got married, we weren't making a lot of money as teachers, but I invested very well, and we got a good pension. And my wife and I are pretty well off now, and things are a lot more complicated now. I mean, with the cell phones and all the technology, life was a lot simpler back then.
All right, looking back at your life, do you have any regrets?
No, I don't say I have any regrets. I think everything, plays out the way it does for a reason. So if I wouldn't change one thing, because everything I've done has brought me to where I am today, and fairly happy with that.
I mean, sure. No. I mean, I regret. Sometimes I regret like not sticking out my first major. I really went into college with the mindset of being like a sportscaster. I wanted to be like a play-by-play announcer, and I gave up on that after probably less than 6 months at college. Like a goal I had for several years just evaporated over a couple of months. And I think in general, just I regret not listening to myself and trusting myself in lots of situations. Maybe being influenced or wanting to be influenced by the opinions of others. That's sort of an ongoing battle, is to trust your own instincts, I guess. But I don't know. There's not much you can't change the past. So I guess there are regrets, but there's also not much use in spending time thinking about them because what's done is done.
Right.
No, I don't think I have really any regrets. I think if the only regret I have is maybe I got on the wrong side of some people and maybe hurt some people, and that I wish I hadn't done that. But as far as my life's journey, I have no regrets about that.
Last question. If you could go back and change anything, would you?
I don't know. There are times where I've wasted certain portions of my life, I think, you know, where you do sort of what you think you're supposed to be doing because you're a certain age. And again, you don't get that time back. So I think I don't want to pin it down to any one particular time or a particular experience, but I think you should always just
That's a good question. What would I change? No, I can't think of anything that I'd change. We went through some tough times. We got married early on, but I don't think I'd change anything because we've been married 50 years now, and the marriage is strong, and I don't think I'd change anything. I mean, you could look back at some of the things that happened earlier on in our life, and we had to struggle quite a bit, but in the end, I think it made us stronger in our relationship, so I don't think I'd change anything.
Okay, that was the last question.
Okay,